The message can be the same, but it depends upon the seal behind the message.
Why was money invented?
Alexandar Chase Cartwright. In the world of finance, it's not about the message. It's about from whom the message comes from. The same information come from a Blackstone, BlackRock, Morgan Stanley, or Goldman Sachs, some of the top institutions. The same message come from an ordinary, an upcoming, an emerging manager. The message can be the same, but once again, it depends upon the seal behind the message will completely change the tone of the message and the weight of the message. So we strongly believe in the history, and nothing like being learning from the history, and also from the message that's communicated through the way of history. This is the first American greenbacked dollar. This dollar was printed in 1862. This is also called the US dollar notes. There was a fight between North and South in America. They thought there is a need for printing new money. At that time, there used to be a Treasury Secretary called Samuel P. Chase. He used to be under the president of Abraham Lincoln. So he came with an idea of printing the first greenback note. Samuel P. Chase also had an ambition to run for the president of America. So he put his photograph, thinking that once he put the photograph, the American dollar will be circulated across the country. So that will make him famous, so he can win the next election. Fortunately, unfortunately, he never won the election. He went on to become the Chief Justice of America. Why do I talk about Samuel P. Chase, the first man who printed the American dollar? From the Samuel P. Chase family, the person, you can look at it in two ways. One way of looking at it, the person who created the dollar fiasco around the world, or the person who created the most powerful money in the world, right? From the Samuel, and he's an economist. He used to be the Treasury Secretary. So we have his great grandson in the room. His whole family is of economists who talk about economics and the money. So we have with us Alexandar Chase Cartwright. The Chase Bank has been named on their family. And Alexandar used to be an economic professor till 6 months back. 6 months back, I convinced him to quit his academic world and made him become an entrepreneur. And that too, I convinced him to leave the real financial world, the traditional financial world. I moved him into the crypto world of a DeFi world. So he's going to talk about the future of money, how the money, history of money and the future of money. Alexandar Chase Cartwright, please.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. One of the biggest changes moving from academia into a private sector is that I used to be paid to speak for 75 to 90 minutes at a time, and now I've got to make sure that I wrap everything up in 20 minutes. But that's a challenge. But the benefit is, looking at the size of this crowd, I don't have to grade everybody's papers, which is a real sigh of relief, especially this time of the year. So I'm going to speak about what we're going to call glocalized wealth. And I'll unpack that concept as we go. Via glocalized wealth, I want you to understand the history of money, to understand glocalized wealth. And we're going to talk some about the history of the container ship as an analog for understanding glocalized wealth. Okay, so this presentation was not endorsed by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. This is an example of some irresponsible monetary policy, and it begets the question, why was money invented? If we're in an economics class, I'd tell you that money was invented as a medium of exchange, as a store of value, as a unit of account. But of course, to pose the question like, why was money invented is a little bit unfair, because it implies that there was a single inventor, or that it was very rationally constructed. Where money was emergent, it was the product of human action, not of human design. It evolved, and it evolved to solve problems. And of course it evolved so that we didn't have to rely on a double coincidence of wants and barter with each other, but it evolved to solve all kinds of unexpected problems. For example, money existed so that you could burn it and ancestors could take their wealth onto the afterlife. It existed to help facilitate marriage proposals. It existed to distribute wealth such that no person had too much money. It evolved to help keep the peace, and it evolved to help keep the army from killing the ruler. Of course, money has got lots of traditional uses as well. In the prehistoric period, money existed in grain as livestock. It existed as tools. It existed in shells. Its form took on what was ever locally available. It was backed by whatever was locally available. And the point is that at this point in time, money was something that was very local. And its core function was just to eliminate us from having to barter with each other. But as cities came to exist, and as economic life became more centralized, governments became centralized, and money moved from being in our pockets, money moved from being physical objects to in our pockets. And money took on the form of coins in bronze and gold. And what's important here is to notice that money is now at a national level or a state level. And it existed not just to facilitate exchange, but also to exert state power and military power. But of course, money that is in a coin form is difficult to carry on international trade. It's heavy. And so we see money emerge in paper form. The first paper money exists in China. And we see money start to emerge as a globally recognized commodity like silver and gold, because those things are durable, divisible, and you could carry a lot of value in a very small physical package, lots of value per ounce, if you will. However, money continues to evolve, and we see that money comes to take on the form of gold, becomes the currency of choice. Money takes on the current of gold, becomes the backing of choice. And of course, from gold-backed paper currency. And gold-backed paper currency is around, and during after World War II, we've got the Bretton Woods Agreement, which Americans, I should say us, very cleverly negotiated with fixed exchange rates and made our currency the only one that was backed by gold. And so that put us in a very favorable position when that system eminently collapsed and the dollar became the world reserve currency. We lived in a world of floating exchange rates and pure fiat. I take you through this 10,000-year history of money in order to point out to you that money has always been evolving. And if we think about what money has been used for, whether that's a marriage proposal or to redistribute wealth, local trade, global trade, to exert state power, etc., it's always been about transacting trust. Trust has been reinvented with money for the last 10,000 years. From grain to coin to paper, trust has always been reinventing. And as the complexities of our economy grow, there should be no surprise that what we are using as money is also changing and evolving to meet the demands of the 21st century economy. Why would we expect the evolution of money to stop? Even though paying for something with dollars to me felt like something so ordinary and so real that it's like equivalent to why there are 24 hours in a day. But when you look at these things in a historical perspective, you realize that what has been considered money and what we're using money for is constantly evolving. In the last 5 years, it's been amazing to see, especially in the last 5 years, the disappearance of physical cash. Money's become now something that we tap, click to use. It's become code. And I think that we're in the age now where we call money a message. It exists as signals and in ledgers. And I point all this out to you so that we can think about how it is exactly that money is evolving. The form of money has been evolving. The backing of money has been evolving. Of course, the scale of money has been evolving. and the utility or the use of money has been evolving. Think about in those examples I showed. The form of money evolved where money was grains, livestock, cattle, tools. Then it became metal, paper. It's becoming more digital. And of course, the question is, what's next? The backing of money evolved from being physical goods to the king's guarantee, to gold, to just government decree alone. And the question now is, what's next? And the scale of money moved from being something very localized, almost just something used in a given community, to something used in a society, kingdom, then a nation, and then a region. And of course, the question now is, what's next? And the utility of money, from just something that was used to facilitate transactions, to something that became more a store of wealth, to now something that is used as capital to generate yield. And the question is, of course, what is next? So now, I've got to tell you what's next. And what's next, I think, are stable coins. The fastest growing form of money that most of you have heard of. Digital tokens pegged to dollars that live on blockchains, move like crypto, and behave like money. The stablecoin market is a $250 billion market size. And just in 2024, more money was transacted on stablecoins than Visa and MasterCard combined, $27.5 trillion. If you add in the 7 months of this year, we're up to almost $34 trillion, I believe. These settle globally without banks and instantly. Major institutions are using them. I don't have to tell a lot of folks in this room about how big a deal this is. But the point I want to make to you is that this is not just fintech. This is the next layer of the global financial system. And I've got an analogy to try and explain just how big of an innovation this is. Before we get there, let me phrase this in a different way. Money just hit escape velocity. It took 5,000 years for money to evolve from grain to gold to paper. And it took just 5 years for stablecoins to become a transaction tool, a global store of wealth, a permissionless asset class. When I was in academia, I'd be asked all the time to have some interview with a trade publication or go on local news and make some kind of macroeconomic prediction, which I never wanted to do because inevitably it would be wrong. And I don't have any special crystal ball. But I can tell you very confidently that we're going to look back in 2024, 2025, and we're going to say, this was a critical point where in our lifetime, money changed for forever. What money is used for, the scale on which money is traded, and the way that we conceive what money can do has fundamentally changed. So the next question is, who gets to shape what comes next in this new era of money? Well, stablecoins themselves have been evolving the last couple years. What started off as just a single utility instrument just for transactions but didn't produce yield has now evolved into the second generation that can produce yield but does not necessarily have transaction abilities. The third generation of stablecoin can produce both yield and facilitate transaction, and I think that the next generation of that is what we're going to call a wealth-generating stablecoin. Can produce yield, it can facilitate transaction, but it also merges the traditional finance and decentralized finance world. It brings traditional assets on-chain, and it retains capital protection, global accessibility, and traditional asset backing. That's what's next. And when that happens, we'll have one kind of money for everyone, everywhere. Quite literally, everyone around the world that has an internet connection and a phone will be able to earn, save, and invest. This will power capital markets, and it'll tokenize real-world assets, and this is happening every day. I think that we need an analogy, though, to understand just how big this glocalization trend is. By glocalization, I mean something that is a global technology, a global innovation that comes with local adoption. That's what stable coins are, a global innovation that will take on local adoption. So once something is locally adopted, once there's some local trust and institutional relevance, and once there's a real economic benefit from using it, then the network effects kick in. The more people that use it, the more valuable it will become, the more transaction costs will fall, and therefore the more returns and yield will rise. That's what's happening. Now, I like to talk about things in these very abstract models because that's my nature as an economist. But let me give you a more simple example of this kind of thing in action. Let's think about world trade. Now, world trade, global trade, it's nothing new. It's been going on for hundreds of years. But did you know that global trade volumes have gone up 45x since 1950? It's only 70 years. We've seen global trade go up by 45x in volume. Global trade's gone up by 382x in terms of global trade value. It's just absolutely exploded. Now, we have known about boats, maritime navigation, basically how to ship things since the time of the Vikings. And there have been innovations in deep water ports, and I understand over the last 100 years we've seen more market economies, the fall of central planning, economics, etc. But still, that does not explain why global trade goes up 45x in volume, 382x in value since 1950. And there's a famous study that was done by Princeton economist Mark Levinson on the shipping container. And in the late 50s, early 60s is where we see the adoption of the shipping container kicking in. And he makes the case that what we needed was some type of modular infrastructure to facilitate global trade. What do I mean by modular infrastructure? You see, that same shipping container can be stacked on a ship that's designed to fit neatly on a truck, and that's designed to fit neatly on a train. Before shipping containers, you would have armies of people at ports in, let's say, Brooklyn, New York, loading ships with all kinds of cartons and barrels and boxes that were all different sizes. It would literally take longer to pack the ship than it did for the ship to go across the ocean. Highly inefficient. It took everyone to adopt one mechanism in order for that network effect to kick in, and all of a sudden, boom, global shipping just explodes. And ships today are 6x the size they were in 1950, not to manage packed more efficiently. Now, let me tell you, I think that it's very poor form to read right off of a slide, but Mark Levinson says this so well. If you would please pardon me, I want to just read a couple sentences of his. I want to break that rule. In 1956, a steel box unlocked global trade, not because it went everywhere the same way, but because every port adapted itself to receive it. The container became a system, not a product. A system, not a product, because local adaptation met global design. That's exactly what's going on in the stablecoin space. Stablecoins are the next shipping container, right? This is the global infrastructure that is right now blossoming, that is going to facilitate global financial trade in a way that we've never seen before. And will that facilitate movement in capital 400 or 500x more, just like it did in the global shipping? At least, absolutely at least. Let's unpack that analogy for a minute. Think of the container like a protocol, just like the stablecoin protocol. Just like we have a global standard with standardized dimensions and locks that can be moved from trucks to trains to boats, same thing with the stablecoin. Right now, in the container world, there was local adaptation. Ports were redesigned, cranes were redesigned, workers were retrained. That's exactly what's going on in the financial world right now, as banks are retooling and redesigning for this new technology. And once that local adaptation happened, this is global technology, like global infrastructure, leading to huge network effects. And that global flywheel took off in the shipping industry. And I predict here today that same thing is going to happen in the financial industry. You will have more assets and users using stablecoin, leading to higher liquidity, more participation, lower transactions costs, and more opportunities and higher yield for users. So, same logic, different era, in short. Stablecoin is what I want to call global money. Remember, glocalization, global innovation, local adoption. Stablecoin, I want to call it global money. Why is that? Because it is going to allow us, to do more complex and global exchanges with all kinds of new things around the world. Local assets owned globally. Like what? For example, like with real estate. With real estate, just talk about the basics of real estate investing for a second. Of course, you can buy real estate to use it. Maybe this is like your home, single family home or apartment. You get some practical use out of it. You can also buy and own real estate on your own. Get some rental yield, some appreciation in value, ideally some tax benefits, but you're gonna absorb all the financial and legal responsibilities of owning a piece of real estate. So the modern financial marketplace has evolved so that investors can get just the rental yield, just the appreciation, just the tax benefits, without having to be responsible to the local property tax office or to the lender or responsive to the tenants to get just the economic benefits of real estate. And of course, you can get that through a REIT, some kind of private placement real estate offering, a real estate mutual fund, etc. But here's what you cannot get. You can't get that if you can't get that in US domiciled real estate living anywhere in the world. You can't get that with capital protection. You can't get that with a minimum assured yield. And you certainly can't get that with high liquidity. Stable coins in traditional real estate are going to make those things possible. They're going to make, notice, not just making US real estate as an example globally accessible, but fundamentally changing the structure and how we invest in real estate in a way that unlocks additional value. What if we say it was possible to invest in real estate with capital protection, to invest in real estate with a minimum assured yield, to invest in real estate with uncapped upside, even though you've got a minimum assured yield, to invest in real estate by choosing which asset you invest in, not just a fund, to be able to confidently predict the potential upside of your property before you invested, do that from anywhere in the world, earn dollars distributed every month or every quarter, effectively getting a global income, and do all that without any fiduciary or legal responsibility that comes with earning real estate. That's all possible with a stable coin oriented investment structure. That does not exist right now. Now you might ask, why are these 7 things important? Because these are 7 dimensions of risk. And if you can insulate yourself from these 7 dimensions of risk, you can get holistic risk protection. That's the kind of risk protection that is needed to generate true generational wealth. And so stablecoin, as an example, can transform real estate investment for everyone to be an all-weather generational asset. So how will this change individual wealth creation? Well, specifically, imagine somebody in Brazil, South Africa, Australia could invest in the Hilton at the Atlanta airport. Somebody in France could own a piece of the Marriott next to Disneyland in Orlando, as an example. Anyone with an internet connection would be able to invest and earn from a piece of real estate in the United States. They could own a hotel room, for example, in New York. They could own a hotel room in Dubai. You could search for the property you want based on brand, based on city. You could confidently look at future projections before you invest, and you could look at past performance before you invest. It doesn't have to just be limited, however, to the hospitality industry or to the United States. Somebody could invest and own student housing in London, a piece of multifamily in Mumbai, or some industrial real estate in Australia. All of that's possible to be done with capital protection using a stablecoin framework. If I could summarize what's going on here with not just the evolution of money, but the evolution of investing. We started off in a place where money was decentralized in the sense that it was defined by consumers and producers and owned by consumers and producers. But the scale was limited and was built on real world value and trust. Now, as governments got involved and money became more centralized, institutions and governments created some efficiency, but they also gained control. And in some places, unfortunately, you got $100 trillion notes. We're now in the next generation where we're getting the benefits of both of these worlds. I call this decentralization 2.0, or an era where blockchain, tokenization, and Web3 are making money powered by technology, secured by trustless systems, and built for global assets. And I call that move, we call that move, the new age of wealth. That's what we're entering right now, the new age of wealth. And stablecoin is a fundamentally glocalized asset, a global piece of innovation that is coming on more and more with local adoption. At GreatX, we're empowering everyone to create and access investments like these. And if you're interested in being a part, let's have a conversation. Thank you very much.